The generations after Adam multiplied across the earth, and men began to fill the valleys and mountains with their cities and songs. The children of Cain built houses of stone and towers of pride, while the descendants of Seth called upon the name of the Lord. But as the years passed and the memory of Eden faded like mist before the sun, the hearts of men turned from their Creator. They took wives from among those who cared not for righteousness, and the sacred line of faith mingled with the line of rebellion. The earth became loud with violence, and the songs of joy turned to the cries of conquest. Men sought power more than peace, pleasure more than purpose. The world that had once echoed with the footsteps of God now trembled beneath the weight of sin. The sons of men became mighty, proud in their strength and glory. They called themselves heroes, builders of empires, masters of the earth. But the Lord looked upon them and saw that every thought of their hearts was evil continually. They worshipped idols of their own making, stone gods and carved beasts, bowing to the works of their hands. They filled the rivers with blood from their wars and the air with the smoke of vanity. The poor were crushed, the innocent silenced, and justice forgotten. The earth groaned under their corruption, and the animals fled from their cities, sensing the darkness that had settled upon man's soul. The Lord beheld the earth and saw that it was filled with violence. The hearts he had formed for love and stewardship had turned to greed and destruction. He said, "My spirit shall not always strive with man, for he is but flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. The words rolled like thunder across eternity, a decree that mercy would not linger forever. Yet even in judgment, there was patience, for the Lord waited, hoping for repentance that never came. The generations mocked the warnings of conscience. They feasted and married, built and sang, their laughter echoing against the hollow walls of their cities. None remembered Eden, and few remembered God. But in the midst of the corruption, one man stood apart. His name was Noah, a descendant of Seth, a man righteous in his generation. While others bowed to false gods, Noah walked with the Lord. He lived quietly, tending his flocks, raising his sons, and teaching them to honor the Maker of heaven and earth. His neighbors mocked him, calling him a dreamer, or relic of old faiths. But Noah's heart was steadfast. He saw the sin around him and wept, not in pride but in sorrow. He would often lift his eyes to the heavens and pray, "O Lord, how long will you bear the weight of man's evil? The earth bleeds because of our hands. Have mercy, but if mercy must give way to justice, let your will be done." And God heard Noah. Among all who dwelt upon the earth, he found in him a heart that still beat in harmony with his own. The Lord said within himself, "The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth." But before destruction, there would be salvation, before judgment, a covenant. The voice of God came to Noah one night as he watched the stars reflected in the river. "Noah," said the voice, "gentle yet mighty, the earth has corrupted itself before me. Every creature follows its own desire, and wickedness has become their law. Behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to cleanse it of its filth. But you I have chosen, for you have walked with me in righteousness. Prepare yourself, for through you shall life endure." Noah trembled, for the word of the Lord was both promise and terror. "A flood, Lord?" he asked. "Will you wash away all that you have made?" And the Lord replied, "I will destroy the evil that has defiled the good. Yet I will save you and your household, and from your seed shall come the generations of a new world. Then the vision came upon Noah, the image of waters rising above mountains, of cities swallowed by waves, of beasts fleeing in vain. But within that vision, he saw also a great vessel floating upon the deep, carrying beasts of every kind and the light of hope within it. Noah fell upon his face and cried, "Let it be as you command, O Lord. If I must build this ark, I will build it, though the world call me mad." When dawn came, Noah spoke to his family. His sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, looked upon their father with concern. "What has the Lord said?" they asked. And Noah told them of the flood that was to come, of the ark that must be built, and of the mercy that still lingered before the storm. His wife wept but did not doubt. "If God has spoken," she said, "then let our hands obey." So Noah set himself to work, gathering wood and measuring the ground, while the people laughed from afar. "The old man builds a ship on dry land," they mocked. "He says water will fall from the sky. Has he lost his mind?" But Noah paid them no heed, for faith does not listen to the laughter of fools. The years passed, and as Noah labored, the hearts of men grew harder still. Violence spread like a plague, and the cries of the innocent rose to heaven. Yet amid the chaos, Noah's hammer rang steady, each strike a sound of defiance against a dying world. The ark took shape, vast and strange, a monument of obedience in a field of corruption. And though none yet saw it, the clouds above had begun to gather, the first breath of the storm that would end an age. The morning after the vision, Noah woke with the heaviness of divine purpose upon his heart. The earth around him was bright and peaceful, yet his spirit trembled, for he knew the calm was only the stillness before the storm. The Lord had spoken, and the world would never be the same again. As he stood before the rising sun, the voice of God came to him once more, clear as wind through cedar branches. "Noah, my servant, make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. You shall make rooms within it and cover it inside and out with pitch. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth 50, and the height 30. Make a window above and a door in its side, and 3 decks you shall build within. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh in which is the breath of life. But with you I will establish my covenant, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you." Noah bowed to the ground, his heart trembling at the immensity of what was asked. He was but one man, old in years, with only his sons to aid him, yet the task before him was as vast as the sea itself. Still, he did not question. Faith rose where strength failed, and obedience became his offering. That day he took his sons to the valley where the trees grew thick and tall. "Here," he said, "will stand the ark of salvation." Shem measured the wood while Japheth sharpened axes, and Ham gathered the pitch to seal the boards. As they labored, Noah's neighbors came, drawn by curiosity and mockery. "What madness is this?" one shouted. "You build a ship where no river flows. Are you expecting the clouds to drown us all?" Noah paused only long enough to answer, "The Lord has spoken. A flood will come upon the earth because of the evil of men. Repent, for the time of mercy grows short." They laughed, clapping their hands. "Your God has abandoned you, old man. There has been no rain from heaven such as you speak of. Go and rest your weary bones." But Noah turned back to his work, the sound of their laughter fading behind the rhythm of the axes. Days became weeks, and weeks became years. The ark rose slowly, immense and silent, its timbers creaking beneath the weight of purpose. From a distance, it looked like a mountain growing in the plain, a wooden fortress against an invisible enemy. Travelers who passed by stopped and stared, asking, "What is this strange structure?" Noah would tell them the same words again and again: "The judgment of God draws near, but His mercy still waits. Turn from your violence and your idols, and He will forgive." But the world had forgotten how to listen. Men cared only for their own pleasure, and women mocked the warning as a tale for children. Yet Noah's faith never faltered. Each night he looked upon the stars and whispered, "Lord, you who created all things, let this ark stand as a testimony to your word. If none will hear, let my obedience be my witness." God watched, and his heart grieved even as his plan unfolded. For he desired not the death of the wicked but their repentance. Still, none turned back. The cries of the oppressed filled the heavens, and the blood of the innocent soaked the ground. Angels looked upon the earth in sorrow, seeing men who once bore the image of God now delight in cruelty. And so the work continued, one beam after another, one nail at a time. The ark grew vast, its frame echoing the patience of its builder. One evening, as Noah rested beside the unfinished hull, a shadow passed over him, and he lifted his eyes. The sky glowed with strange colors, as though the sun itself wept. "Lord," he said softly, "the world mocks me, yet I will not cease. But tell me, when the flood comes, how shall the creatures of the earth be saved?" And the Lord spoke again, his voice deep and steady as the earth itself, "Of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every kind into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of birds after their kind, of beasts after their kind, and of every creeping thing that moves upon the ground. Take with you food for them and for your household, that none may perish." Noah bowed his head. "It shall be as you command." From that night forward, the forest echoed with the sounds of work. The sons of Noah felled trees until the ground trembled, shaping each trunk according to their father's instruction. Birds watched from above, and beasts wandered near, drawn by some unseen calling. It was as though creation itself understood what man denied. When the sun set, the family gathered by the ark, their faces lit by firelight. Noah's wife spoke softly, "The people think us mad, but I feel the truth in my bones. The world grows darker, yet our hands build light." Noah smiled faintly. The Lord always prepares a way before the storm. The ark neared completion after long years of labor. Its sides shone with the black sheen of pitch, sealed against the waters to come. The people still laughed, but their laughter was uneasy now, for the skies had begun to change. Strange winds blew from the east, and the air carried a heaviness no man could explain. The rivers swelled beyond their banks, and the beasts of the field grew restless. Some said it was coincidence, others whispered that perhaps the old prophet was right. But none repented. When at last the ark stood finished, its vast form casting a shadow over the plain, Noah fell to his knees before it. "It is done, Lord," he said. "As you have spoken, so I have built. May this ark be your mercy upon the earth." And the Lord, watching from heaven, saw that Noah had done all that he commanded. The time of preparation was complete, and the day of reckoning drew near. The winds grew stronger, the light dimmer, and far away the clouds began to gather, dark and heavy as the sorrow of God. The world still danced, still feasted, still mocked, but above the noise of men, the whisper of judgment moved like thunder yet unborn. The ark stood silent, waiting, and Noah's heart waited with it. The ark stood complete, vast and silent upon the plain, its blackened timbers glistening with pitch beneath the dimming sun. It towered over the land like a monument of obedience, a witness to faith in an unbelieving world. The people had grown weary of mocking, yet they could not look away. Some called it folly, others whispered that it was cursed. Still, Noah waited, patient as the trees that had given their wood. Then one dawn, when the air was thick with stillness, a sound unlike any before stirred across the fields, the rustle of countless feet, the beating of wings, the low murmurs of creation answering its maker's call. Noah stepped from his tent and lifted his eyes. From the forests, from the mountains, from the deserts and the rivers, the creatures of the earth were coming. 2 by 2 they moved toward the ark, lions and lambs walking side by side, wolves beside deer, serpents gliding beside doves. The sight filled Noah's heart with awe and trembling, for it was not by his voice that they came, but by the command of the Almighty. Shem called out, "Father, look! The beasts obey the Lord more swiftly than men." Noah nodded, his voice low with wonder. "Yes, my son. Creation remembers what man has forgotten." The family worked quickly, guiding the animals into the great vessel as the Lord had commanded. They built pens for the beasts, roosts for the birds, and chambers for the creeping things of the earth. Food was stored, water gathered, and all was prepared in quiet reverence. The people of the land came to watch. Some shouted, "Behold the madman who speaks with beasts." Others stood in silence, unease creeping into their laughter. A few approached Noah and asked, "Why do these creatures come? What power calls them?" And Noah answered, "It is not my power, but the word of the Lord. He gathers his creation before the flood of his judgment. Turn from your wickedness, and there may yet be mercy." But they shook their heads and turned away, their hearts hardened beyond reason. For men will believe in anything except the truth that condemns them. The sky grew heavy day by day. The winds changed, carrying the scent of rain though no drop had yet fallen. The beasts within the ark grew restless, sensing what man could not. Birds circled low in the air, crying out as though warning the world. Ham stood by the doorway of the ark and whispered, "Father, the heavens darken more each night. How soon will the waters come?" Noah answered, "When the last of God's creatures has entered, the door shall be shut, and then the earth shall tremble." As the days passed, the procession continued, elephants shaking the ground with their steps, eagles landing upon the roof beams, tiny insects crawling into crevices prepared for them. Even the fish in the rivers stirred and gathered near the banks, waiting for the rising tide. It was a harmony unseen since Eden, a final song of obedience before the world fell silent. Shem watched in awe. "Father," he said, "I see now that faith is not only to believe, but to act, even when the world mocks." Noah placed his hand upon his son's shoulder and replied, "Yes, my son. Faith is the bridge between God's command and man's salvation." At night, Noah prayed beside the ark, his voice faint beneath the low rumble of the wind. "O Lord, your creatures come as you decreed. Let your mercy remember them when the waters rise. Let your hand guide this vessel as you once guided the stars into their place." And the Lord's presence filled his heart, calm and strong, saying, "Fear not, my servant. You have done all that I commanded. Soon the fountains of the deep shall break forth, and the windows of heaven shall open. But my covenant shall stand with you. On the seventh day, the gathering ceased. The fields lay empty, the forests quiet. All that lived and breathed according to God's will had found shelter within the ark. Noah stood at the door, gazing out at the world that had refused to listen. The people still feasted and sang in their cities, mocking the unseen storm. Some pointed toward the ark and said, "The sky has always given light, the rivers have always flowed. There will be no flood." But others, seeing the strange silence that now covered the land, felt a chill they could not name. Then, as the final light of evening faded, the Lord spoke once more. "Enter the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of every clean beast, and 2 of the unclean, that life may abound after the waters have passed." Noah gathered his family. His wife, her eyes full of both fear and faith, took his hand. Shem, Ham, and Japheth stood ready with their wives, their hearts steady though the air seemed to press heavy upon their chests. Together they crossed the threshold into the great vessel, and as they did, the earth seemed to hold its breath. Noah turned once more toward the plain, his voice breaking as he cried out, "O people of the earth, the day of mercy ends. Turn now while the door still stands open." But no voice answered. Only the wind replied, carrying dust across the ground like ashes of a world already judged. Then, as the final moment of grace passed, the hand of the Lord closed the door of the ark. It sealed with a sound like thunder, and darkness fell. Inside, all was still. The beasts rested, the lamps burned softly, and Noah's family knelt in prayer. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, gentle at first, like tears upon the earth. The sound grew stronger, turning to a steady drumming that filled the night. The heavens had opened, and judgment had begun. The night deepened, and the air was heavy with the scent of rain. Inside the ark, Noah and his family sat in silence, their hearts trembling though their faith held firm. The beasts were restless, their breaths steaming in the dim light of the lamps. Outside, the world waited unknowingly for its final dawn. Then a sound unlike any that had ever been heard broke across the heavens, a low, growing roar, as though the sky itself were tearing apart. The first great flash of lightning split the clouds, and the rain fell, not in drops but in torrents, pounding the earth with furious rhythm. The storm had begun. The people who had mocked Noah lifted their eyes in confusion. The laughter died from their lips as the ground beneath them turned to mud and rivers burst from their banks. The air filled with wind and the cries of men, women, and children who fled to the hills, crying out to gods of stone that could not save them. The fountains of the deep erupted from the earth, sending geysers of boiling water into the storm. The rivers, seas, and lakes rose as one, devouring fields and villages. Inside the ark, the timbers groaned under the strain of the storm, but it did not yield. Noah knelt with his family and prayed, "O Lord, our refuge and strength, remember your covenant and sustain us through the flood." The wind howled like 1,000 voices, and waves crashed against the sides of the ark, lifting it from the ground. The great vessel shuddered, creaked, and then, with a mighty surge, began to float upon the rising waters. Ham clung to a beam, his eyes wide with fear. "Father, the ground is gone," he cried. Noah answered, "Do not fear, my son. The Lord who called us will carry us through." The rain did not stop. It fell for 40 days and 40 nights, relentless and cold. Mountains vanished beneath the waves, and trees disappeared into the depths. The waters swallowed cities and temples, washing away idols and the works of man's pride. From the highest towers, people cried out to heaven, but their voices were drowned by the storm. The ark rose higher and higher, carried upon the wrath of the waters. Inside, Noah's family tended to the animals, calming them as thunder shook the heavens. The elephants trumpeted, the lions roared, the birds beat their wings in confusion. Yet through the chaos, the ark held steady, a single island of order in a world undone. From within the darkness, Noah spoke softly to his sons. "The earth is being cleansed," he said. "All that was corrupted shall be washed away. Remember this, for when the waters fall and we step upon dry land again, let not pride return to the hearts of men." Shem nodded solemnly. "Father, will the Lord remember mercy after such wrath?" Noah looked toward the ceiling where the rain thundered overhead. "Yes," he said, "for his justice is perfect, and his mercy endures beyond the storm." Days passed without light. The sun was hidden, the stars gone. The sky was one endless sea of gray, the earth one endless sea of water. The ark drifted aimlessly, guided only by the unseen hand of God. Noah kept watch from the small window above, gazing out into the watery void. He saw no land, no bird, no tree, only waves that rose like mountains and fell like valleys. At times, fear crept into his heart, but then he would recall the words of the Lord, "I will establish my covenant with you." Those words were his anchor, as sure as the wood that bore him. Outside, the world that once teemed with life had vanished. The songs of men were silenced, the footsteps of beasts erased. The mountains that had once touched the clouds now lay hidden beneath the flood. The wind carried no voices, only the endless cry of the waters. And yet, even amid destruction, creation obeyed its master. The sea did not rise beyond his command, the storm did not rage beyond his will. Inside the ark, time lost meaning. The family moved through the days in routine, feeding, praying, waiting. The sound of rain became their constant companion, the rhythm of judgment and endurance. Noah would often sit by the small window and speak to the silence. "O Lord, you who made the heavens and the earth, you who breathe life into dust, let this vessel not perish. Let it rest upon the waters as a child upon its mother's arms." And though he could not see it, the presence of God hovered above the ark, guiding it gently across the face of the deep. Then, on the 40th day, the rain ceased. The thunder fell silent, and the wind grew still. A strange calm spread across the endless sea. The clouds broke apart, and for the first time in many weeks, the pale light of the sun fell upon the waters. The ark drifted quietly, its reflection shimmering upon the vast expanse. Noah and his sons climbed to the upper deck, their eyes blinking against the sudden brightness. "The rain has stopped," whispered Japheth. "Is it over?" Noah shook his head. "Not yet. The waters must still recede, and the earth must breathe again." They gazed in awe at the horizon, an ocean where mountains once stood. The world had been reborn, though it still slept beneath the flood. The air was clean and still, carrying the scent of salt and renewal. Noah closed his eyes and prayed, Blessed be the Lord who judges righteously and remembers mercy. Let this cleansing prepare the way for new life. Night fell once more, and stars appeared, their reflections dancing on the waves. The family gathered in silence, grateful to be alive. The beasts rested peacefully, sensing that the wrath had passed. Though the flood still covered the earth, within the ark there was peace, the peace of obedience, the peace of trust. Outside, the waters whispered over a world washed clean, waiting for the command that would summon the dawn of a new beginning. The world was silent beneath the sky, and the ark floated upon an endless ocean that had swallowed every mountain and valley. The rain had ceased, but the waters still ruled the earth, stretching beyond sight in every direction. There was no sound of birds, no cry of beasts, no voice of man, only the slow creak of wood and the whisper of waves brushing against the sides of the vessel. Noah stood at the small window, looking out over the vast emptiness. "So this is what remains," he murmured, his breath fogging the air. "The mountains are buried, the cities are gone, and the pride of man is washed away. Yet your promise, O Lord, endures even here." His sons stood behind him, silent, their faces lit by the pale light that filtered through the clouds. The ark drifted slowly, moved by unseen hands. The waters were deep and dark, their depths holding the bones of the old world. Days passed, and the family inside lived by the rhythm of duty and faith. They fed the animals, cleaned their pens, and tended to the lamps. When fear crept into their hearts, they sang the old songs of creation, songs their father had taught them, songs that spoke of the first dawn, when God said, "Let there be light." Those words now echoed softly within the ark, a light no flood could extinguish. At night, when all within the ark slept, Noah kept watch by the window. He saw the moon rise over the waters, its reflection rippling like silver fire. Sometimes he thought he heard distant voices, the memories of those who had once laughed, now lost beneath the sea. He bowed his head and whispered, "O Lord, the earth is silent because of our sin. Let this silence teach us to fear you rightly and to cherish your mercy when it returns." The days blended together, 40 and more, until the passing of time seemed meaningless. The ark drifted without direction, yet never aimlessly. Noah knew that the same hand that had brought the flood now carried them through it. The beasts grew calm, their wildness softened by the stillness around them. The lions slept beside the lambs, the wolves no longer hunted. It was as though the ark held a small reflection of Eden, a momentary peace preserved from the ruin outside. One morning, Noah woke to find the air different. The wind had shifted, cooler and gentle, carrying the scent of distant earth. He climbed to the deck and saw that the waters had begun to move, not in chaos, but in retreat. The sun burned brighter, and the currents swirled as though drawn toward the unseen depths. He called to his sons, and together they watched the horizon. "The waters obey him as all things do," Noah said. "When he commands them to fall, they will fall." But though the surface stirred, the land beneath was still hidden, and many weeks would pass before the earth would breathe again. Inside, life continued with the same quiet patience. The family prayed together each morning and each night, giving thanks for breath, for shelter, for faith that endured. The animals stirred less often now, resting as if they too waited for the Lord's next word. Shem often asked his father, "When will the land appear again?" And Noah always answered, "When God remembers us." Those words became their comfort, for though the Lord had not spoken since the door was sealed, they knew he had not forgotten. Then, on the 150th day, a sound rose through the air, a deep grinding, like rock meeting rock. The ark shuddered, tilted slightly, and came to rest. Noah grasped a beam to steady himself, his heart racing. "Father," cried Japheth, "what has happened?" Noah looked toward the window and saw the water's motion had slowed. "The Lord has set us down," he said. They waited until the morning light, and when the sun rose, they saw the peaks of mountains piercing through the waves. The ark had come to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. Tears filled Noah's eyes. "Blessed be the Lord," he whispered. "The earth lives again." They remained within the ark, for the waters had not yet fully retreated, but hope now bloomed within their hearts. Each day, more peaks appeared, their tips glowing beneath the sun. The birds inside stirred restlessly, sensing the nearness of open air. Ham opened a hatch and let the wind sweep through the ark. It carried with it the scent of stone and soil, the first breath of the new world. Noah gathered his family around him that night. "Children," he said, "we have endured the wrath of heaven. The flood has done its work, and soon the earth shall rise again. Remember this when we step upon the ground once more, never let the hearts of men grow proud again, for pride is the seed of ruin." They listened in silence, the flicker of the lamp reflecting in their eyes. "We will remember, Father," Shem said. "And we will teach our children to remember also." As the days passed, the waters continued to fall, and the ark rested firm upon its mountain cradle. The sky cleared, deep and blue, and stars returned to the night. Noah looked upon them with peace in his heart. The storm had ended, the judgment fulfilled, and yet the covenant remained, unseen but alive, waiting for the moment it would be spoken again. And so the ark drifted no more. It stood still among the peaks, cradled between heaven and earth, a silent witness that faith can float even upon the flood of destruction. Outside, the world lay still, wrapped in the quiet of rebirth. The winds whispered over the waters, carrying with them a promise, that never again would the earth be destroyed in such a way. Inside, Noah and his family prayed, unaware that soon, God would open the door to a new beginning. The ark rested quietly upon the mountains of Ararat, its massive frame held fast among the peaks that now pierced through the receding flood. The waters still covered the valleys, shimmering beneath the pale sunlight, but each day they fell a little more, running down in long streams toward the plains below. Inside the ark, all was calm. The beasts had grown gentle after so many days of confinement, and the family moved softly, their voices low in reverence. Noah stood by the small window high in the wall, gazing out upon the world that was being born anew. The air smelled of wet stone and clean wind, and the sky, though pale, seemed washed and pure. "The Lord remembers," he whispered, "for the flood recedes, and the earth begins to breathe again." Weeks passed, and still Noah waited. The waters continued to fall, yet no dry ground could be seen beyond the mountain peaks. His sons often asked when they might step outside again, and he would answer, "When the Lord gives us a sign, then we shall go." The patience of the righteous had become their offering, for they lived now only by faith and the rhythm of God's will. One morning, Noah woke before dawn and climbed to the window. The sky was streaked with red, and the air was still. He looked toward the horizon and said, "It is time to send forth a messenger." He called for Ham and said, "Bring me one of the ravens, for it is the first to go. The raven, black and restless, perched upon Noah's arm as the others gathered behind him. Noah lifted it to the light. "Go," he said softly, "and see if the waters have abated from the face of the earth." The bird spread its wings and flew into the open sky, circling the ark before vanishing into the distance. They watched until it was no more than a shadow upon the clouds. Days passed, and though the raven did not return to rest within the ark, it did not bring back news of dry land. It flew to and fro over the waters, feeding on what floated upon the surface. "The raven has not brought word," said Shem. "Perhaps the earth is still not ready." Noah nodded. "Then we will wait again, for the Lord's timing is perfect." After 7 more days, Noah took another bird, a dove, gentle and white. Its eyes were bright with innocence, and it cooed softly as he held it in his hands. "The raven found no peace," he said, "but the dove seeks only the pure and the dry. If it does not return, then we shall know the earth is ready." He released the dove, and it flew forth into the open sky, its wings flashing like silver in the light. They watched until it became a speck over the waters. That evening, as the sun sank behind the peaks, Noah returned to the window and looked out. His heart stirred as he saw a small shape gliding toward the ark. The dove returned, its wings weary, and it found no place to rest. It flew back to Noah's hand, and he drew it inside. "Not yet," he said softly, stroking its feathers. "The earth still sleeps beneath the waters." 7 more days passed. The air grew warmer, and the winds shifted from the east. Noah felt hope rising like the dawn. Once again, he took the dove in his hands and set it free. "Go," he whispered, "and find the promise of the Lord." The bird flew into the horizon, disappearing among the clouds. The hours passed slowly, and the family watched the sky. Then, as the light of evening spread across the waters, a soft flutter came to the window. The dove returned, and in its beak, it carried a small green leaf, fresh and living, plucked from an olive tree. Noah's eyes filled with tears. "The earth lives again," he said. "The Lord has opened his hand, and life has found root once more." He showed the leaf to his sons, and they bowed their heads in gratitude. "The sign of peace," whispered Japheth. "The wrath is ended." For the first time in many months, the ark was filled with laughter, quiet and trembling, but full of joy. They placed the olive leaf upon the altar they had built within, a token of thanksgiving. That night, Noah could not sleep. He stood by the window, gazing at the stars reflected in the still waters below. "You have remembered mercy, O Lord," he prayed. "You destroy only to heal, you wash away only to renew. As the flood cleansed the earth, so let this new beginning cleanse the hearts of men." After 7 more days, Noah released the dove once more. It flew into the morning light and did not return. He knew then that the bird had found a home, and that the earth was ready. The mountains shone bright in the sunlight, and the tops of trees began to emerge from the depths. Streams ran down the slopes, and the world that had been drowned in judgment now glimmered with promise. The ark still stood firm, resting upon its mountain, but within it the hearts of those who had endured began to stir with longing. "The Lord has remembered us," said Noah's wife, tears shining in her eyes. "Soon we will walk upon the ground again." Yet Noah waited still, for he would not move until God spoke. He taught his sons, "Do not rush ahead of the Lord, for obedience is better than haste. He who has carried us through the storm will also lead us into peace." The family continued their prayers and their care for the creatures, each day brighter than the last. The sky cleared fully, and the wind dried the face of the earth. And though the door of the ark remained closed, hope filled the air like the scent of spring after long winter rain. The raven had shown endurance, the dove had brought peace, and Noah had learned patience. Thus the ark became not only a vessel of survival but a school of faith. And in the quiet that followed, God looked down upon his servant and smiled, for the heart of Noah was steadfast, and the earth was ready to begin again. The morning light broke soft and golden across the mountains of Ararat, touching the ark with warmth for the first time since the storm began. The air smelled of earth and green things, and the cries of distant birds echoed faintly in the clear sky. Inside the ark, Noah stirred from his sleep and felt a peace unlike any he had known in months. The silence was no longer heavy with fear but alive with promise. He rose and climbed to the small window where the wind blew fresh and cool. Below him, the waters had fallen far, leaving valleys and plains glistening like polished mirrors. New grass had begun to grow along the slopes, and trees lifted their branches as though reaching toward heaven in thanksgiving. The world had been reborn. Noah stood for a long time, watching the sunlight spread across the mountains, his heart swelling with awe. "O Lord," he whispered, "you have judged with justice and remembered mercy. The waters have done their work, and life rises again at your command." Behind him, the family gathered quietly. His wife stepped forward, her face radiant with hope. "Is it time, my husband?" she asked. "Shall we step upon the earth again?" Noah looked to the sky, his eyes filled with light. "Not yet," he said softly. "We will wait for the Lord to speak, as we waited through the storm." Days passed in peace. The beasts within the ark stirred restlessly now, their instincts waking to the scent of the open air. Birds beat their wings against the beams, and the lions growled softly in their pens. Shem said, "Father, even the animals long to leave. Surely the Lord is near to calling us forth." Noah smiled gently. "Yes, my son. Creation waits upon the voice of its maker." Then, one night, as the family rested in the quiet glow of the lamps, a stillness deeper than silence filled the ark. Noah's heart quickened, for he felt the presence of God. The voice that had spoken before the flood now came again, calm and strong as the roots of the mountains. "Noah," said the Lord, "come out of the ark, you and your wife, and your sons and their wives with you. Bring out every living thing that is with you, birds, beasts, and every creeping thing, that they may breed abundantly upon the earth, and be fruitful, and multiply." Noah bowed his head, tears streaming down his face. "Blessed be your name, O Lord," he said. "You have remembered us, and your mercy has no end." He called to his family, his voice trembling with joy. "The Lord has spoken. It is time to begin again." The great door that had been sealed by God's own hand now stirred, creaking as the wind pressed against it. Noah placed his hand upon the wood, worn smooth by the long months of waiting. "This door," he said, "was shut in judgment and now opens in grace." Together with his sons, he pushed, and the door swung wide, revealing a world washed clean. Sunlight flooded the ark, blinding them for a moment after the long darkness. The beasts stirred with excitement, their roars and cries filling the air. One by one, Noah released them. The elephants trumpeted as they stepped into the open, the lions lifted their heads to the sky, the birds soared upward in a rush of color and sound. The air was alive again, trembling with the pulse of creation renewed. Noah and his family stepped out last. The ground beneath their feet was damp and cool, soft with new growth. They fell to their knees upon the earth and wept, overwhelmed by the beauty before them. The mountains rose high and clear, the rivers shone like silver, and the air was pure. The sky arched above them, vast and blue, unmarred by smoke or sin. Noah's wife lifted her hands toward heaven. "The Lord has made all things new," she said. "Let us never forget His mercy." Noah looked around him, seeing the marks of the flood, the broken stones, the twisted trees, but even these bore a strange beauty, as though the world itself remembered the cleansing. "This," he said, "is not the end but the beginning of all things anew." His sons gathered beside him, and together they began to choose a place for their first altar. They built it upon a flat stone near the foot of the mountain, using the clean wood that had remained from the ark. Noah brought forth one of the clean beasts, and upon the altar he offered it to the Lord as a sacrifice of thanksgiving. The smoke rose straight into the sky, curling upward until it vanished into the light. The scent filled the air, mingling with the freshness of the new earth. Then the voice of the Lord came again, not in thunder but in peace. "I will never again curse the ground because of man, though the heart of man is prone to evil from his youth. Neither will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease." Noah bowed his head, his tears falling upon the ground. "Your words are life, O Lord," he said. "May my children's children remember them forever." As the sun sank beyond the mountains, the sky blazed with color. The clouds turned to gold and crimson, and a great arc of light stretched across the heavens, a bow of many colors, shining brighter than the sun itself. The family gazed upward in awe. "What is it, Father?" asked Japheth. Noah smiled, his heart full. "It is the sign of the covenant," he said. "The Lord has set His bow in the clouds as a promise to all generations. When the rains fall again, this light shall remind us that mercy follows judgment and that God's love endures beyond wrath." The world lay quiet as night descended, but it was no longer a world of fear. It was a world reborn in grace. The beasts settled in the valleys, the rivers sang softly, and above them the rainbow still glowed faintly, a bridge between heaven and earth. Noah and his family sat by the altar, the fire burning low. The stars emerged one by one, and in their light, the promise of peace shone eternal. The dawn rose soft upon the mountains, and mist drifted gently through the valleys as if the earth exhaled after long sorrow. The ark rested quietly behind them, half hidden by vines and stones, a monument of faith and survival. Noah stood upon the hill beside his family, the altar still warm with the embers of sacrifice. The rainbow shimmered faintly above the horizon, its colors bending like light made of mercy. The world was new, silent yet filled with the pulse of life awakening again. In that stillness, the voice of the Lord came to Noah once more, not as thunder or wind, but as calm authority that filled the soul with reverence and peace. "Be fruitful and multiply," said the Lord, "and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the field, every bird of the air, and every fish of the sea. Into your hands they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, even as the green plants I have given you. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. For the life of all flesh is in its blood, and I have made it holy before me." Noah listened, trembling with awe. His sons knelt beside him, heads bowed, and the women wept softly, for they knew they were hearing the beginning of something eternal. The Lord continued, "Surely, for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in my image have I made mankind. Go forth now, spread across the earth, and let righteousness guide your ways." Noah lifted his eyes to the sky where the light of the rainbow glowed brighter. "O Lord," he said, "you are just in all your ways. The flood has taught us the weight of sin, but this promise teaches us the strength of mercy." The Lord's voice filled the air like music over water. "Behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood, neither shall there be a flood to destroy the earth." Noah's heart trembled with gratitude. "You are faithful," he said, "and your word endures forever." Then the Lord said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you, for everlasting generations. I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living thing, and the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh." The family fell upon their knees, tears streaming down their faces. The air shimmered as sunlight broke through the mist, igniting the rainbow into brilliance. Each color glowed with divine fire, crimson like sacrifice, gold like glory, green like new life, and blue like heaven itself. Noah whispered, "The bow of peace, the promise of life. From now until the end of days, it will speak of your mercy." The Lord's presence faded into the wind, but his words remained, etched upon their hearts forever. When the voice ceased, Noah stood in silence for a long time. His sons rose beside him, and the animals in the valleys below lifted their heads as if listening to the echoes of the covenant. The world felt alive with meaning. Every tree seemed to stand straighter, every river ran clearer, as though creation itself understood that it had been given a second chance. Shem spoke quietly, "Father, the Lord has renewed his trust in us. Will we keep it?" Noah looked toward the horizon, where the colors of the rainbow faded into light. "We must," he said. "For though the flood washed the earth, it could not wash the sin from man's heart. The covenant is not only God's promise to us but our vow to walk in his ways." They descended the hill and began to build their new homes near the foot of the mountain. The land was rich and fertile, covered with green shoots and fresh streams that flowed from the melting snow above. They planted seeds, tended the animals, and worked the soil with gratitude. Each sunrise reminded them of the day God had opened the door of the ark, and each evening, when the sun sank and the colors of the sky blazed in faint reflection of the rainbow, they would gather to pray. "Lord," Noah would say, "let us never forget that your bow is set between heaven and earth, binding your mercy to our frailty." As the months passed, life spread quickly across the plains. The beasts multiplied, the birds nested in the trees, and the rivers teemed with fish. The world, cleansed and reborn, thrived under the blessing of the covenant. Yet even as the earth flourished, Noah's heart carried the memory of judgment, not as a shadow, but as wisdom. He taught his sons to honor life, to shed no blood in anger, to remember that all breath belonged first to God. He told them, "The earth is not ours to rule but to tend. We are keepers of His mercy, not masters of His power." On the first anniversary of their deliverance, Noah built a second altar upon the hill where they had first offered thanksgiving. The rainbow appeared again that day, brighter than ever, arching across the entire sky. The family knelt as Noah lifted his hands. "The covenant remains," he said. "Though we may falter, He does not. Though man forgets, God remembers. Let the bow remind us always that judgment passes, but love endures." The wind swept across the mountain, carrying His words through the valleys and plains, over rivers and forests, until they faded into the hum of creation. And so began the new age of the earth, the age of covenant, mercy, and rebirth. The ark, now resting forever upon Ararat, stood as a monument of faith. The rainbow stretched above it, linking heaven and earth, a bridge of light that would speak for generations to come, that God remembers, that hope is never drowned, and that every storm ends in peace. The world beneath the mountains of Ararat spread vast and green, a living canvas brushed fresh by the hand of God. Rivers shimmered like silver veins through the plains, and forests whispered in the wind, their leaves singing softly beneath the sky. The earth was new, not young, but reborn, its silence now filled with the sounds of renewal. The cries of beasts echoed across the valleys, the birds returned in flocks, and the waters teemed once more with life. Noah stood upon a hill overlooking the land and felt the cool breeze against his face. "This is the Lord's promise made visible," he said. "The flood has passed, and mercy has sown the seeds of life again." His family had built their dwellings nearby, simple shelters of stone and timber. They worked together, planting seeds and taming the fields. Every sunrise was a reminder of deliverance, every sunset a hymn of gratitude. The soil was rich and yielded easily to their hands. When they tilled the ground, they could almost hear it sigh in contentment, freed at last from the weight of corruption. Yet Noah's eyes often turned toward the ark, now resting like a silent monument high upon the mountain. It was half covered in vines, but its timbers glowed golden in the sun, a testament to faith that endures beyond fear. "It will remain," he told his sons, "as a witness to all who come after us, that obedience can save a world." The days lengthened, and the sons of Noah grew strong. Shem tended the flocks and learned the ways of the stars, Ham worked the soil and built shelters, and Japheth roamed far and wide, mapping the new land and naming its rivers and valleys. Their wives bore children, and the laughter of the young filled the camp. The world that had once been empty now echoed with the heartbeat of life. But Noah, though joyful, carried the wisdom of sorrow. He often said, "Remember the waters that cover the mountains. Remember the pride that brought them. Let humility be our foundation, for though the earth is clean, man's heart remains fragile." The covenant rainbow still appeared often, arching across the sky after the rain, and each time the family would stop their work and bow in silence. The colors gleamed like jewels above the green earth, a reminder that even in judgment, God had chosen mercy. Noah's wife would hold the children close and whisper, "Look well, little ones. That light is His promise, it means we are never forgotten." The children would nod solemnly, their eyes wide with wonder. Seasons passed. The world ripened under the warmth of the sun. The vineyards that Noah planted grew quickly, their vines wrapping around the trellises in vibrant green. It was the first fruit of the new earth, and Noah tended it carefully, for he saw in it both blessing and caution. The fruit gladdens the heart, he told his sons, but too much joy can turn a blessing into shame. Be mindful, for even in peace, temptation hides. His words carried the weight of foresight, as if he already felt the tremors of weakness beneath the calm. As years went by, Noah's family multiplied. Tents and houses spread across the valley, and the once quiet land buzzed with the hum of work and laughter. Streams were dammed, gardens expanded, and herds moved freely across the plains. It seemed that the world had entered a golden age, untouched by fear. Yet even as joy grew, so did restlessness. Ham, the boldest of the sons, began to wander beyond the valley, seeking lands to claim. "The world is wide," he said. "Surely it was meant for more than this." Shem cautioned him, "Do not stray too far from the blessing of our father." But Ham only smiled. "The Lord gave the earth to us all. I will see what lies beyond." Noah watched his sons with pride and unease. He loved them deeply, yet he knew that freedom was both gift and test. The flood destroyed sin, but not desire, he said to his wife one evening. Soon they will build and conquer, as men always do. I only pray they remember who gives them breath. She took his hand and said softly, "Your faith saved us once. It will guide them, too." One night, a storm gathered, not of rain, but of memory. Noah could not sleep. He walked outside beneath the stars and gazed at the horizon where lightning flickered faintly in the distance. "You gave us a new world, Lord," he prayed, "but will we honor it? Will man keep his heart pure?" A cool wind brushed his face, carrying the scent of earth and vines, and he felt the quiet assurance of the Almighty, not in words, but in the peace that filled him. The rainbow had faded hours before, yet its promise still lingered in the air, unseen but alive. The next morning dawned clear. The flood's memory was now a story told to the children, who listened with wide eyes as Noah spoke of the great ark, the endless waters, and the dove that carried peace. The Lord destroyed, yet he also restored, he told them. That is the lesson of the flood, that mercy is stronger than wrath, and faith is greater than fear. The children clung to his words, not yet knowing how easily generations forget what their fathers endured. Noah's vineyard came to full harvest, and he pressed the grapes, their fragrance sweet and strong. He blessed the fruit, saying, "From the earth we came, and by its fruit we are sustained." Let this wine remind us that joy, too, is a gift of God. The sun set red and deep behind the mountains as the family gathered to feast. The air was filled with music and laughter, echoing through the valleys of the New World. It seemed, for a moment, that the peace of Eden had returned. But far above them, upon the mountain where the ark still stood, the wind whispered through its ancient beams, not with warning, but with remembrance. The covenant still held, the promise still stood, yet even the cleanest earth would soon feel the footsteps of man's imperfection again. For though the world had begun anew, the story of man was far from over. The sun shone warm upon the valley, and the vineyard that Noah had planted stretched wide across the slopes like a tapestry of emerald and gold. The vines hung heavy with ripe fruit, their clusters gleaming with sweetness beneath the afternoon light. It had been years since the flood, and the world had settled into peace. The rivers flowed gently, the fields yielded abundantly, and the covenant rainbow appeared often in the heavens, a constant reminder of God's mercy. Noah, now aged and weary, walked among the vines with a quiet smile. His hands traced the leaves, and he murmured, "The Lord has given the earth to live again. He has brought joy from the soil that once was drowned in sorrow." He gathered grapes and pressed them into wine, the first of its kind upon the new earth. The fragrance filled the air, rich and warm. When he tasted it, he closed his eyes, and for a moment the sweetness lifted the weight that years of labor had placed upon his shoulders. He thanked God aloud, saying, "You have turned the tears of judgment into the wine of gladness." Yet as the days passed, Noah's heart, once so steadfast, began to rest more upon comfort than upon vigilance. The storm was long forgotten, the laughter of his family filled the camp, and the shadow of fear had vanished from memory. He told himself that peace was proof of righteousness, that contentment was holiness, and so the guard around his spirit slowly weakened. One evening, as the sun melted into the hills, Noah sat alone beside the vineyard. The air was still, the sky ablaze with crimson light, and the scent of grapes clung to the wind. He drank from the wine he had made, and it warmed him, loosening his thoughts and quieting his soul. He drank again, and the weight of years seemed to fade. For the first time since the ark had rested upon Ararat, his mind drifted without purpose. His eyes grew heavy, and laughter rose from his lips, strange and unguarded. He stumbled into his tent, the world spinning softly around him, and soon he lay asleep, his robe fallen aside, his dignity forgotten. Ham, his younger son, walked by not long after, returning from the fields. He heard the sound of laughter and entered his father's tent. What he saw there filled him not with compassion but with mockery. Instead of covering his father, Ham ran to his brothers, shouting, "Come and see! The mighty Noah, the man who built the ark and spoke with God, lies drunken and uncovered." His words dripped with pride and disrespect. But Shem and Japheth, upon hearing this, were struck with grief. "Do not speak so," said Shem. "Our father is righteous, and his shame is not for our eyes." Together, they took a garment and, walking backward into the tent, covered their father without looking upon his nakedness. Then they left quietly, their hearts heavy. When the morning came, Noah woke, his head bowed with pain and confusion. The air in the tent was cool and still, but his spirit felt disturbed. He remembered the wine, the laughter, the sleep, and then the silence that followed. As he rose, the truth dawned upon him like a bitter sunrise. His sons' voices reached him outside, and his heart sank. He called them before him, his face pale with sorrow rather than anger. "What has been done in the darkness has been brought to light," he said. Ham stood proudly, unrepentant, while Shem and Japheth lowered their eyes in humility. Noah's voice trembled as he spoke. The flood washed the earth clean, but it did not wash sin from man's heart. The same pride that built cities before the waters now speaks from your tongue, my son. He turned to Ham, his eyes filled with tears. "You mocked what should have been sacred. You looked upon your father's weakness and made it a jest. Therefore, the seed of your line shall bear the weight of that dishonor." Then to Shem and Japheth he said, "You walked in reverence and mercy. You turned your faces from shame and acted with grace. The Lord will bless your generations, and they shall dwell beneath his favor." The words hung heavy in the air. Ham said nothing, his expression hard, but guilt flickered behind his eyes. The others wept, for they knew that though peace ruled the earth, the flaw within humanity had risen once more. That night, Noah sat alone by the vineyard. The moon cast a pale light over the vines, and the winepress stood silent. He looked at the fruit and sighed deeply. "Even this," he said softly, "what you made for joy, we turn to folly. Lord, forgive me, for even I, whom you called righteous, have stumbled." His eyes lifted to the heavens, where the stars burned clear and bright. Man is dust, yet you remember him. Man forgets, yet you renew him. If you do not hold us fast, we will fall again into the darkness we fled. The wind rustled through the leaves, carrying a whisper of peace, the same peace that had followed the flood. In the days that followed, Noah no longer drank of the vine. He tended it still, but only as a reminder, a lesson rooted in the soil of grace. He taught his children and their children that even in a new world, sin grows as swiftly as vines if not watched carefully. The earth has been cleansed, he said, but man must cleanse his heart each day. His voice, old and weary, carried wisdom born of both triumph and failure. Years passed, and Noah grew frail. His hair turned white as the snows upon the mountains, and his eyes dimmed, yet his faith burned bright until his final breath. When at last he lay upon his bed, surrounded by his family, he said, "Remember the flood and the covenant. Remember the bow in the sky and the mercy that endures beyond judgment. Walk humbly with the Lord, for pride is the seed of ruin. Build not towers but altars, and may your children's children remember the name of God." Then he blessed them, and his spirit returned to the one who had carried him through storm and silence alike. Outside, the wind moved softly through the vineyard. The sky glowed faintly with the colors of the covenant, and the ark, resting far above upon the mountain, stood silent beneath the stars, a witness to both man's frailty and God's unending grace. After Noah's passing, a deep stillness fell over the valley of Ararat. The air itself seemed to pause, as though all creation mourned the man through whom life had been preserved. His family buried him near the altar he had built, the same place where he had offered his first sacrifice after the flood. The smoke of that altar had once carried the scent of thanksgiving to heaven, now the earth carried the scent of remembrance. Around the grave, Shem, Ham, and Japheth stood together, their faces marked with sorrow and thought. The ark still rested high upon the mountain behind them, silent as stone, watching over their grief like a monument of faith and endurance. When the burial was complete, Shem spoke quietly, "Our father has gone to rest with the Lord who called him. The earth lives again because of his obedience. Let us not lose what he taught us." For a time, they dwelt together in peace. The families of the brothers grew, the children played along the rivers, and the land yielded its fruit abundantly. The air was filled with laughter, and the valleys echoed with songs of life reborn. But as the generations multiplied, so did their ambitions. The command of God, "Be fruitful and fill the earth," began to stir within their hearts, and each of the brothers saw the world beyond the valley differently. Shem, the eldest, was wise and devout. He spoke often of the covenant and the holiness of life. "We must carry father's faith into the lands beyond," he said. "The Lord's name must not be forgotten." Ham, bold and restless, looked upon the wide plains to the south. "The earth is vast and rich," he said. "It is time to claim it." Japheth, calm and thoughtful, gazed toward the west where the mountains melted into mist. "We shall spread across the lands," he said, but may our hearts remain one. And so the sons of Noah divided their herds and goods, and with blessings they parted ways. Shem led his people eastward toward the highlands and fertile plains. His descendants would become keepers of the sacred word, from whom prophets and nations of faith would one day arise. He walked humbly, carrying his father's teachings, and his tents were filled with prayer. Ham turned southward, his eyes fixed upon the warmth and wealth of the lands beyond the rivers. His people grew strong and cunning, building cities and kingdoms under the burning sun. Yet the shadow of his father's curse lingered in his line, and pride began to take root in the hearts of his descendants. Japheth journeyed north and west, through mountains and forests, across rivers and coasts. His descendants spread far, multiplying greatly, becoming seekers of knowledge and wanderers of the wide earth. As the brothers parted, Noah's widow stood alone before the ark, her eyes wet with both pride and pain. He dreamed of a world made new, she whispered, and now his sons will fill it. The wind stirred her hair, and the rainbow shimmered faintly through the clouds as if heaven itself gave its blessing to the spreading of mankind. Years turned into generations, and the earth became full again. Villages grew into towns, and towns into cities. People traded, built, and traveled far. The world seemed at peace, yet beneath its beauty, the seed of division had already been sown. The sons of Shem taught their children reverence and faith, but many of Ham's descendants turned their eyes toward idols, shaping gods of stone and gold from the dust they had been given to till. Japheth's line became builders and explorers, their hearts curious yet often forgetting the one who had made them. Still, the memory of the flood endured in stories told by firelight. Elders spoke of the ark, of the dove and the rainbow, of the man who had walked with God and lived when the world was destroyed. Children listened wide-eyed, but as the years passed, the stories grew softer, more distant. Faith turned to legend, and obedience turned to pride. The further mankind spread, the further many strayed from the covenant. Yet there remained those who remembered. The descendants of Shem built altars to the Lord and kept the sacred name alive. Among them were men and women who still walked in righteousness, teaching that all breath belonged to God. They called themselves keepers of the promise, guardians of the bow in the sky. Though the nations wander, they said, the Lord's mercy endures forever. Far away, in the lands of Ham, great cities began to rise, towers of stone that reached toward heaven, monuments of man's growing ambition. Japheth's people sailed the seas and hunted in the forests, filling the earth as God had commanded, though many forgot to fill their hearts with gratitude. The earth had been cleansed once, but already the dust of pride began to gather again upon it. One night, Shem stood beneath the stars and gazed toward the horizon where his brothers had gone. "Father," he whispered into the wind, "we have done as you taught us. The earth is full again, yet I fear the heart of man still leans toward the same shadow. The flood washed the world, but not the soul. Will there come another reckoning?" Above him, the stars shimmered like the eyes of angels, silent but watchful. The wind blew softly, carrying the faint sound of distant thunder, though no storm followed. In time, the sons of Shem, Ham, and Japheth became the fathers of nations. Their tongues changed, their faces varied, but all bore the image of the same Creator. The covenant still stood, unbroken in heaven even when forgotten on earth. The rainbow still appeared after rain, and those who looked upon it with faith felt peace in their hearts, though few remembered its meaning. And so mankind grew again, stronger, wiser, yet still fragile. The sons of Noah had filled the earth as God had commanded, and from their blood would rise both saints and kings, tyrants and prophets. The story of the flood had ended, but the story of man had only begun. Generations passed after the sons of Noah spread across the earth, and the world once again teemed with life, music, and ambition. The plains of Shinar stretched wide beneath the open sky, fertile, green, and rich with promise. There, men began to gather, speaking one language, sharing one mind. Their hearts were filled with pride in their strength and unity, for they said to one another, "Behold, we are one people with one tongue. Nothing we imagine will be impossible for us." The memory of the flood had faded into legend, and the covenant had become but a story told by a few who still feared the Lord. The rest looked upon the heavens not with reverence, but with defiance. Among them arose Nimrod, a mighty man, a grandson of Ham, strong and cunning in his ways. He hunted beasts, conquered tribes, and built cities upon the plains. His name meant the rebel, for he was bold before the Lord. Nimrod's fame spread, and the people hailed him as king, calling him the founder of their might. He said to them, "We will no longer be scattered as our fathers were. We will build a city that stands forever and a tower whose top shall reach unto heaven. Then we shall make for ourselves a name that even the gods will fear." The crowd roared in agreement, their hearts swelling with pride. They gathered stone and clay and said, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they built with brick instead of stone, and tar for mortar, forging strength from the earth that God had once used to bury their pride. Day after day, the tower rose higher. Its base was broad, its walls thick, and its top disappeared into the clouds. The people of Shinar worked tirelessly, their chants echoing through the valley, "Higher! Higher! To the heavens we rise." They no longer prayed to the Lord who made the sky, they sought instead to conquer it. The tower became their idol, a monument to man's power, his will to defy his maker. Nimrod walked among the workers and said, "This shall be our throne above the floods. No storm shall touch us again, and no god shall scatter us." And the people cheered, their hammers beating like drums of rebellion. But in the heavens above, the Lord looked down upon the city and the tower. The angels beside him watched in sorrow, for they saw how quickly pride had returned to man's heart. The Lord said, "Behold, they are one people and speak one tongue, and this they begin to do. Now nothing they imagine will be restrained from them. They will raise themselves against heaven again." His voice rumbled like distant thunder as he said, "Come, let us go down, and there confound their speech, that they may not understand one another's words." That night, as the people labored beneath the moon, strange confusion fell upon them. One man spoke to his brother, and his brother could not understand him. Another called for water, but his helper brought fire. Laughter turned to shouting, and shouting to rage. Words tangled like threads, breaking the unity that had bound them. Some began to speak in new tongues, strange and unknown. Fear spread through the workers as their cries rose into the night. "What is this madness?" they cried. "Why can no one understand?" Nimrod shouted from the heights of the tower, his voice echoing in a dozen tongues he could no longer comprehend. Panic seized the city. The people who had once built side by side now turned against one another. Tools fell from their hands, and the work ceased. The tower stood half finished, its top lost in mist, its base cracked by the weight of its own pride. Families gathered their goods and fled in every direction, each to find their own land where their language could be understood. The plains of Shinar emptied, their once mighty unity broken like glass. The sound of hammers died, replaced by the murmurs of countless new tongues, the birth of nations. Nimrod watched in fury as his dream crumbled. "We were one," he cried, but none could answer him. His words fell into the wind, lost among the voices of confusion. The tower, which had once been the symbol of man's greatness, now stood as a monument of his folly. Its shadow stretched across the valley, long and cold. The people named the city Babel, for there the Lord had confounded their speech and scattered them upon the face of the whole earth. As they departed, some looked back at the unfinished tower, its peak vanishing into the mist. They felt shame but also awe, for they knew they had reached beyond what was meant for them. The wind that blew through its empty halls seemed to whisper, "Remember." The rainbow still shone sometimes above the plains, but few now understood its meaning. Pride had built the tower, mercy had torn it down. Generations later, the ruins of Babel still stood, worn by time, swallowed by dust and vines. Travelers would come upon its stones and ask, "Who built this?" And the elders would answer, "Those who wish to climb into heaven without faith." Then they would tell the story of how men once spoke one tongue, how the Lord had scattered them to teach humility. From that scattering came the nations of the earth, each with its own speech, its own song, and its own path. Though divided by word and distance, all carried within them the memory of one Creator. Some remembered with reverence, others with rebellion, but none could forget entirely. The tower that sought to reach heaven had fallen, yet heaven's word endured, written not in stone, but in the hearts of those who still sought the truth. Thus the pride of man met the wisdom of God once more, and from confusion came diversity, from judgment came life. And though Babel lay in ruins, the story of its fall became the quiet warning carried through all generations, that unity built on arrogance leads only to division, but humility before God binds even nations that speak in 1,000 tongues. The generations after Babel spread across the face of the earth like rivers flowing from one great spring. Each valley and mountain echoed with new tongues, and every tribe carried its own gods, made by their hands and carved from the dust they walked upon. The nations forgot the Lord who had created heaven and earth, and though they looked at the stars, they no longer saw His glory in them. The descendants of Shem dwelt among the eastern lands, and from them came a man named Terah, who lived in the city of Ur, a place of wealth, idols, and learning, but little faith. Terah had 3 sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran died young, leaving a son named Lot, and Abram took the boy into his care. Abram was unlike the men of his time. Though the city worshipped the moon and the sun, his heart was troubled by their emptiness. He would walk alone at night upon the plains and lift his eyes to the stars. "These lights are wondrous," he would whisper, "but who placed them there? Who commands their paths?" In the quiet of his soul, he felt a presence, vast, invisible, yet near, as though the heavens themselves breathed with purpose. He did not yet know the name of the one he sought, but his heart recognized the voice when it came. One night, while the fires of Ur flickered in the distance, the voice of the Lord came to Abram for the first time, clear, gentle, and mighty all at once. "Abram," said the voice, and he fell upon his knees, trembling. "I am the Lord who made the heavens and the earth." Leave your country, your kindred, and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. In you shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Abram bowed his face to the ground, his heart burning with awe. Lord, he said, I am but one man. I have no child, no nation, no power. How shall I do this thing? But the Lord answered, It is not your strength that will make it so, but my promise. Walk before me in faith, and I will guide you. When the vision ended, Abram rose, his soul filled with peace and fear mingled together. He went to his wife Sarai, beautiful and faithful though barren, and said, The Lord has spoken to me. We must leave this place. Sarai looked upon him with trust that defied reason. If the Lord has called, then we will go, she said. Terah, their father, chose to go with them, along with Lot, and they gathered their servants and goods. When dawn came, they left the great city of Ur, its towers fading into the desert behind them. The people of the city mocked them, saying, Where do you go, old man, to chase a voice in the wind? But Abram did not answer, for the voice of God was stronger than their laughter. Their journey led them through deserts and mountains, through lands filled with strangers and wild beasts. Each night, Abram built an altar and prayed. Though the Lord had not yet shown him the promised land, he walked with faith as his compass. When his father Terah grew old, they settled for a time in Haran, a place rich in pasture. Years passed, and still the Lord was silent. Many would have doubted, but Abram waited. Faith had taken root in his soul like a tree that cannot be moved by wind. Then one night, as he watched the stars, those same stars he had once questioned, the Lord's voice came again. Abram, it said, the time has come. Arise, and go from your country to the land I will give you. I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could count the dust, he would also count your children. Abram fell upon his face in reverence, and his tears fell upon the ground as though to seal the promise. I will go, Lord, he whispered. Though I know not where, I will follow. At dawn, he gathered his people once more. Sarai stood beside him, her eyes steady, her faith as unshaken as his. Lot followed too, loyal and eager for the unknown. They took their flocks and herds and began the long journey southward, leaving Haran behind. For many days they crossed barren lands, trusting only in the word of God. When they came to the land of Canaan, the Lord appeared to Abram again and said, To your descendants I will give this land. There, in the shadow of great oaks near Shechem, Abram built an altar and offered thanksgiving. But Canaan was not yet his, nor was it peaceful. The land was filled with other peoples, tribes who bowed to idols, kings who ruled by the sword. Yet Abram feared no man, for he walked under the promise of heaven. Wherever he went, he built altars, not cities. Wherever he camped, he brought blessing, not conquest. The people whispered of him as the wanderer with the unseen God. One evening, as Abram looked upon the setting sun, he thought of the promise of descendants. His heart ached with longing, for he and Sarai were old, and her womb had never borne a child. Lord, he prayed, you have given me all things, flocks, herds, and peace, but I have no heir. When I die, will your promise end with me? The Lord's voice answered from the quiet of his heart, Look now toward heaven and number the stars, if you are able to count them. so shall your descendants be. And Abram believed the Lord, and it was counted to him for righteousness. He built another altar that night and named it Adonai-Yahweh, the Lord will provide. The wind rustled through the trees as if echoing his faith. Sarai came to his side and said softly, "You believe this promise though years pass without sign?" Abram took her hand and smiled. "Yes," he said, "for the one who spoke it is the maker of stars, and he does not forget." And so, beneath the same heavens that had once looked down upon the flood and Babel's pride, a new beginning was written, not in stone or tower, but in the heart of one man who chose to believe. Through him, the covenant of mercy would take flesh and the light of faith would pass from generation to generation, until all nations would be blessed through his seed. The years passed slowly in the land of Canaan, and Abram's tents stretched wide across the valleys like pale sails beneath the sun. His flocks grew, his servants multiplied, and his name became known among the tribes of the land. Yet though he possessed all that the world could offer, one thing remained beyond his reach, a child. He and Sarai were old now, the promise of descendants as countless as the stars seemed an impossible dream. Still, Abram held to faith like a man clinging to the mast in the storm. Each dawn he rose to pray, "O Lord, you who brought me out of Ur, shall the one without a child yet become a father of nations?" And each evening, when he looked upon the heavens, he remembered the words, "So shall your descendants be." One night, the Lord came to Abram in a vision. The air shimmered with light though no fire burned. "Do not be afraid, Abram," said the voice, "I am your shield and your exceeding great reward." Abram bowed low and said, "Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the one born in my house will be my heir? You have given me no son." Then the Lord brought him outside beneath the open sky. "Look now toward heaven," he said, "and count the stars if you are able. So shall your descendants be." And Abram believed, and the Lord counted it to him for righteousness. The vision deepened, and the Lord said, "I am the one who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land to inherit." Abram answered, "Lord God, how shall I know that I will inherit it?" Then God told him to bring a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a pigeon. Abram obeyed, and as the sun went down, he laid the sacrifices upon the ground. A deep sleep fell upon him, and terror mixed with glory settled over him. Smoke and fire moved between the pieces, a sign of the divine covenant. Then the voice of the Lord spoke again, "Know certainly that your descendants shall be strangers in a land not their own, and they shall serve others and be afflicted 400 years. But afterward, I will bring them out with great possessions, and they shall return to this land. For the iniquity of the nations is not yet complete." When Abram awoke, the stars still shone overhead, and the covenant had been sealed in blood and promise. Time moved on, but Sarai's womb remained barren. One evening, she came to Abram with eyes weary from waiting. "You see, my lord," she said, "that the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Go in, I pray you, to my maidservant Hagar. Perhaps I shall obtain children through her." Abram hesitated, but he loved his wife and wished to ease her sorrow. So he took Hagar, and she conceived. Yet when she saw that she was with child, pride filled her heart, and she began to despise Sarai. Strife entered the tents of peace. Sarai's grief turned to anger, and Hagar fled into the wilderness. There, by a spring, the angel of the Lord found her and said, "Return to your mistress and submit to her, for the Lord has heard your affliction. You shall bear a son and call his name Ishmael, for the Lord has listened to your cry. Hagar returned, and in time bore Abram a son. Abram loved the boy and named him Ishmael, which means God hears. For 13 years he raised him, thinking perhaps the promise had come to pass through this child. But the Lord's plan was not yet fulfilled. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared again in glory, saying, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly. Abram fell upon his face, trembling, and the Lord said, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of many nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but Abraham, for I have made you a father of multitudes. And as for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah, for she shall be a mother of nations. Kings shall come from her. Abraham bowed low and laughed softly, not in disbelief, but in wonder. Shall a child be born to one who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90, bear a son? The Lord replied, Is anything too hard for me? About this time next year, Sarah shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will bless him also, and make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear. Then the Lord commanded circumcision as the sign of the covenant, a mark of belonging, written in the flesh of Abraham's descendants forever. When the Lord departed, Abraham obeyed that very day. He circumcised himself, Ishmael, and every male in his household, sealing the promise with blood and obedience. The covenant was complete, not of stone, not of tower, but of heart and faith. Months later, 3 strangers came to Abraham's tent by the oaks of Mamre. The day was hot, and Abraham ran to meet them, bowing low to the ground. My lords, he said, do not pass by your servant. Let water be brought, and wash your feet. Rest under the tree while I bring food. Sarah baked bread, and Abraham served a tender calf with milk and curds. When they had eaten, one of the men said, Where is Sarah your wife? Abraham replied, She is in the tent. Then the Lord said, I will surely return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son. Sarah heard it from within the tent and laughed softly to herself, saying, After I am old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? But the Lord said, Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return, and she shall have a son. Sarah, afraid, denied it and said, I did not laugh. But he replied, No, you did laugh. And yet his promise stood firm. When the visitors rose and looked toward Sodom, Abraham walked with them. Then the Lord revealed to him the coming judgment upon that wicked city, for its sin had reached heaven. Abraham stood before the Lord and pleaded, Will you destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city? The Lord said, If I find 50, I will spare it. Abraham pressed again, 45, then 40, then 30, 20, 10, and the Lord, patient and merciful, said, For 10's sake I will not destroy it. As the Lord departed, Abraham stood long in silence, his heart heavy for the fate of men, yet full of gratitude that the God of heaven would speak with him as a friend. The stars rose above Mamre once more, and their light shone upon an old man who believed the impossible, trusted the unseen, and carried in his heart the seed of a promise that would one day bless the world. The morning sun rose over the plains of Mamre, gilding the tents of Abraham with gold and peace. The air was still and full of promise. It had been a year since the Lord's visit, a year since the words that had seemed impossible were spoken, that Sarah, old and barren, would bear a child. Many had forgotten, but Abraham had not. Each day he looked toward heaven and whispered, "In your time, O Lord." Sarah too remembered, though she spoke little of it. Sometimes she would rest her hand upon her stomach, feeling the stillness there, and wonder if such a miracle could ever bloom within her. Yet deep within, faith had begun to stir, quiet, tender, persistent, like the first light before dawn. Then one night, as the stars shone like silver lamps above the camp, Sarah woke with a start. The world was silent, yet within her there was movement, life. Her hand pressed to her belly, trembling, and she whispered, "It has begun." Tears filled her eyes, not of fear but of awe. When morning came, she told Abraham, and his face broke into a smile that seemed to erase 100 years. He fell to his knees, lifting his hands toward the heavens. "You are faithful, O Lord," he said, "and your word never fails." Months passed, and the camp of Abraham was filled with quiet anticipation. Servants moved softly, as if guarding a holy secret. Sarah's laughter returned, the laughter of a woman who had carried sorrow too long and at last found joy. Even strangers passing by could feel the blessing that rested upon the household. The promise had taken flesh, and the whole camp seemed to breathe with reverence. At last, the day came. The sky was clear, and the hills stood silent, as though creation itself waited. Sarah's cry echoed through the tent, then softened into a sound no one had heard from her before, the cry of a mother. Abraham entered, and Sarah held in her arms a small, perfect child, his skin soft as new light. Her face shone brighter than the dawn. "His name," she whispered, "shall be Isaac," for I laughed, and God has made me to laugh again. Abraham bowed his head, and his heart swelled with joy beyond words. "You have turned our mourning into dancing," he said, and kissed the child's brow. When Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded, sealing the covenant in the flesh of the promised son. Then he built an altar and offered thanksgiving. The smoke rose gently into the sky, and the scent of sacrifice mingled with the laughter of the camp. The Lord had done what he had said. Sarah, who once doubted, now declared to all. Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. Her voice carried through the tents like music, and all who heard it rejoiced. Isaac grew strong, full of light and wonder. He followed Abraham through the fields, learning to tend the flocks and to build altars. Sarah watched him from the doorway, her eyes soft with pride and love. For years, sorrow had shadowed her heart, but now joy had taken its place. Even Hagar, who had long since gone into the wilderness with Ishmael, was remembered with a touch of compassion rather than bitterness. Time had healed many wounds, and the promise had brought peace to the house. When Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. The camp was alive with music, the air thick with the smell of roasted lamb, and laughter filled the night. Servants danced, children played, and the stars shone bright above. It was a day of pure rejoicing, the fulfillment of a dream older than the sands of the desert. Yet amid the joy, shadows still lingered. Ishmael, now a young man, watched from afar, his eyes dark with envy. He saw Isaac, the child of promise, cradled in Sarah's arms, and bitterness stirred within him. He mocked the boy's laughter, and Sarah's heart grew troubled. That evening, she came to Abraham, her joy clouded by sorrow. "Cast out this bondwoman and her son," she said, "for the son of the bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, Isaac." Abraham was torn. Ishmael was his flesh and blood, and his love for the boy was deep. He prayed that night with a heavy heart, and the Lord spoke to him, "Do not let it grieve you because of the boy and his mother. In all that Sarah has said, listen to her voice, for in Isaac shall your seed be called. But I will make a nation also of the son of the bondwoman, because he is your seed." At dawn, Abraham rose and prepared food and water. He gave them to Hagar and placed the boy upon her shoulder. His voice trembled as he said, "Go, and may the Lord watch over you." Hagar's eyes filled with tears, but she did not speak. She turned and walked into the desert, her figure shrinking in the rising light. Abraham stood long after they were gone, his heart torn between faith and grief. But deep within, he knew that God's promise would stand. Days later, Sarah found Abraham sitting alone beneath the oaks, Isaac playing nearby. She placed her hand on his shoulder and said, "The Lord has kept his word, my husband. You believed, and he has given us laughter forever." Abraham looked upon his son and smiled. "Yes," he said softly, "but every promise brings a test. I do not know what lies ahead, but the God who gave will also guide." That night, as the camp grew quiet and the stars once more filled the sky, Abraham prayed beside the altar. "Lord," he said, "you are true in all your ways. You bring life from barrenness, hope from despair, joy from sorrow. Teach me always to trust you, even when your ways are beyond my understanding." And from the heavens came only silence, yet it was the silence of peace, of a promise fulfilled but not yet complete. For though Isaac's birth was the dawn of blessing, the greatest test of Abraham's faith was yet to come, a trial that would pierce the heart of every father who ever loved his child, and reveal to all generations the depth of God's own love. The years passed peacefully in the land of Canaan, and Isaac grew into a strong and gentle young man. His laughter still filled Abraham's tents, a sound that reminded everyone of God's faithfulness. The boy's eyes were bright with wonder, his heart pure and obedient. He loved to walk with his father through the hills, asking questions about the stars, the wind, and the God who had made them. Abraham's heart swelled with pride and gratitude every time he looked upon him, for Isaac was not only his son, he was the living promise of God. Yet deep within, Abraham often wondered why the Lord had been silent since the day of Isaac's birth. He prayed each morning and night, and though no voice came, he trusted that God watched over them still. Then one evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the world turned gold, the silence broke. Abraham sat alone beside the altar he had built, the same place where he had offered countless sacrifices of thanksgiving. Suddenly, a voice filled the air, calm, familiar, yet weighty with divine authority. "Abraham." He lifted his head and answered, "Here I am, Lord." The voice continued, "Take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will show you." The world seemed to stop. Abraham's heart froze. His breath caught in his chest as the words echoed again, "Your son, your only son." For a long time he sat in silence, unable to move. Then slowly, Trembling, he whispered, "Lord, surely I have not heard you rightly." But no other voice came, only the whispering of the wind. That night he did not sleep. He watched the stars, the same stars beneath which the promise had been made. Each one seemed to pierce his heart. He thought of Isaac's smile, his laughter, his mother's joy. Every part of his soul screamed against the command, yet faith held him upright. "If he who gave the promise now asks for it back," Abraham murmured, "then I must trust that his purpose is greater than I can see." Before dawn, he rose quietly, saddled his donkey, and woke 2 servants. Then he went to Isaac's tent. The boy stirred, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Father," he said softly, "is it time for sacrifice?" Abraham's voice trembled as he answered, "Yes, my son. We go to worship the Lord." Sarai did not stir as they left the camp. The air was cool and still, the first light creeping over the horizon. They traveled for 3 days. Each night Abraham looked at his son and saw the reflection of every promise God had ever made, and every test that faith demanded. Isaac walked beside him, carrying bundles of wood, sometimes humming the songs he had learned at the altar. "Father," he asked on the second day, "where's the lamb for the offering?" Abraham's throat tightened, but he answered, "My son, God himself will provide the lamb." And Isaac, trusting as always, nodded without another word. On the 3rd day, they came within sight of Moriah. The mountain rose steep and solemn against the morning sky. Abraham told the servants, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go yonder and worship, and we will return to you." He laid the wood upon Isaac's shoulders and took the fire and the knife in his own hands. Together they climbed in silence. The wind sighed through the rocks like the breath of heaven watching. At the summit, Abraham built an altar as he had done many times before. He placed the wood upon it carefully, his hands trembling. Then he turned to Isaac. His eyes were wet, his face pale as stone. "My son," he said, "the Lord has asked for you." For a moment Isaac stood still, confused, searching his father's face for some sign of jest, but there was none. The truth struck him like thunder. Yet even in his fear, he saw the faith in Abraham's eyes. Slowly, he nodded. "If it is the will of the Lord," he whispered, "then let it be done." His words pierced Abraham's heart deeper than any blade could. Together they built the altar, and Isaac laid himself upon it without resistance. Abraham's tears fell upon his son's face as he lifted the knife. His hand shook violently, but he did not falter. The heavens held their breath. Then, just as the blade was about to fall, a voice thundered from the sky, "Abraham! Abraham!" He dropped the knife and cried, "Here I am." The voice replied, "Do not lay your hand upon the boy, nor do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Abraham fell to his knees, weeping. His arms trembled as he untied Isaac and drew him close. "My son," he sobbed, "the Lord has spared you." Then Isaac pointed toward a thicket nearby, where a ram was caught by its horns. "Father," he said softly, "look, the Lord has provided." Abraham lifted his eyes to heaven and cried, "Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide." He took the ram and offered it in place of his son. The smoke rose into the sky, carrying with it every fear, every sorrow, every ounce of faith that had ever burned within him. When the sacrifice was complete, the angel of the Lord spoke again, "Because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, I will bless you and multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven and as the sand upon the seashore. In your seed shall all nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." Abraham and Isaac descended the mountain together, the morning sun warming their faces. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Isaac said, "Father, when you raised the knife, did you believe the Lord would stop you?" Abraham looked at him, his eyes shining with tears. "I believed, my son," he said softly, "that even if he did not stop me, he could raise you from the dead. The Lord's promise cannot die." Isaac smiled faintly and took his father's hand. Together they walked down the path toward home. When they returned to the camp, Sarah ran to meet them, her eyes filled with joy and confusion. She saw her son alive and wept, clinging to him. Abraham stood behind them, silent, gazing toward the distant mountain. The place would forever be known as Mount Moriah, the mountain of testing, the mountain of faith. That night, Abraham built another altar. The stars shone above him, brighter than ever, each one a witness to the covenant now sealed by obedience. He lifted his voice and said, "Lord, you have shown me that love is not the absence of sacrifice but its fulfillment. I gave what was dearest to me, and you returned him to me. Your mercy is beyond measure." The wind stirred the ashes of the altar, and the flames danced one last time before fading into peace. And so the promise endured, not only in Isaac's life, but in the faith of a man who trusted that God's goodness was greater than his understanding. The mountain of sacrifice became the mountain of salvation, and the echo of that faith would one day resound through all generations when another father would offer his beloved son, and this time, there would be no ram caught in the thicket. The days of Abraham drew near to their end, and peace rested upon him like the calm of evening after a long and faithful day. He was old, full of years, and satisfied with life. The promise of God had been fulfilled before his eyes. His son Isaac stood strong beside him, blessed with a good wife and the same faith that had once led Abraham out of Ur. The tents of his household spread far across the land, and his herds covered the valleys like waves of gold beneath the sun. Yet Abraham's thoughts often wandered beyond the horizon, toward the place where Sarah rested, and beyond even that, to the presence of the Lord who had called him friend. Each morning, he rose to pray, his voice trembling but sure. "Lord," he would say, "you have led me every step. You called me from my father's house, gave me a son in my old age, and showed me mercy beyond measure. Now let me rest in your promise as I have walked in it." His eyes grew dim, but his heart saw clearly the covenant that would outlive him, a nation yet unborn, countless as the stars above. Isaac often came to sit beside him, and Abraham would place his hand upon his son's head, blessing him anew. "Remember, my son," he would say, "the Lord is faithful. Walk in his ways, and he will never fail you. The promise belongs not to me but to all who believe." In those final years, Abraham took comfort in seeing Isaac and Rebekah together, their love pure and steadfast, their faith already bearing fruit. Rebekah tended to him as a daughter, bringing food, cool water, and gentle laughter. The camp was peaceful, the air was filled with gratitude. Even Ishmael, the son of Hagar, came from the wilderness to see his father. The years had softened him, and when he entered Abraham's tent, the old man smiled. "My son," he said, "the Lord has made you a great nation as he promised. Let there be peace between you and your brother. And there was peace. For the first time in many years, the sons of Abraham sat together beneath the same roof, sharing bread and memory. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Abraham asked to be carried outside his tent. He wished to see the sky one last time. Isaac and Ishmael lifted him gently, and together they set him beneath the oaks where he had built his first altar. The wind was soft, and the scent of earth and sheep filled the air. He looked toward the heavens, where countless stars had begun to appear. "So many," he whispered. "When first I looked upon them, I was alone and childless. Now the world is filled with the fruit of that promise. Truly, the Lord is righteous." His sons knelt beside him, their hands clasped in silence. As the night deepened, Abraham spoke once more, his voice faint but sure. "My sons, tell your children and your children's children that the Lord is one. Trust him in famine and in plenty, in joy and in sorrow. He does not change. When he commands, obey; when he promises, wait; and when he blesses, give thanks. The path of faith is not easy, but it is the only road that leads to peace." His eyes grew distant, reflecting the light of the stars. "The God who called me is calling still, to every heart that will listen." Then he closed his eyes, and the breath left him like a sigh carried upon the wind. Abraham, the friend of God, slept. At dawn, the camp was silent. Isaac and Ishmael prepared his body with reverence, wrapping it in fine linen. Together they carried him to the cave of Machpelah, where Sarah lay. The sun rose as they sealed the tomb, its light spilling gently across the stones. Isaac placed his hand upon the entrance and whispered, "Rest now, Father. Your faith has built a nation." Ishmael bowed beside him, tears in his eyes. Though they had lived apart, in that moment they were brothers, united by the same blood, the same memory, the same promise. Afterward, the camp mourned, but not as those without hope. Isaac took up the mantle of his father's faith, leading the people in prayer and offering. That evening, as the stars filled the sky, he stood where his father had stood and built an altar of his own. The fire burned bright against the darkening hills. Rebekah came to his side, and together they lifted their hands to heaven. "O Lord," Isaac prayed, "you are the God of my father Abraham, and now you are my God. As you kept him, keep us. As you led him, lead us. May his faith live on through us and through every generation to come." The wind stirred through the oaks, whispering softly through the branches, as though carrying Abraham's blessing to the stars. Far above, the heavens shimmered with the same eternal covenant, the light of a promise that would never fade. And in that light, the story of Abraham did not end. It continued, written upon the hearts of his descendants, and through them, the world would one day know the fullness of God's redemption. So the life of Abraham, the wanderer, the believer, the father of nations, came to its close, not in despair but in glory. He had left everything behind to follow a voice, and in doing so, he had found everything that mattered. Faith had guided him, obedience had sustained him, and now peace received him. And though his body rested in the earth, his spirit lived on in the covenant, in the stars, and in the unbroken faith of all who walk the path he first began. After the death of Abraham, the blessing of the Lord rested fully upon Isaac. The tents of his father still stood beneath the oaks of Mamre, and the fields around them flourished as if heaven itself watered them. The people said, "The God of Abraham is with Isaac," and indeed it was so. Yet though he had inherited his father's faith and wealth, Isaac soon learned that every generation must meet its own trials. The covenant was eternal, but each heart had to choose faith anew. Isaac and Rebekah lived in peace for many years, yet sorrow touched them, for she was barren as Sarah once had been. Isaac prayed earnestly to the Lord for his wife, and the Lord heard him. In time Rebekah conceived, but her pregnancy was hard. Within her, the children struggled together, and she cried out in distress. "If all is well, why am I like this?" she asked, and she went to inquire of the Lord. The answer came in a voice that echoed both prophecy and mystery: "Two nations are in your womb, two peoples shall be separated from within you. One shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger." When her time came, Rebekah bore twins. The first came out red and covered with hair like a garment, and they called his name Esau. Afterward his brother came out, grasping Esau's heel with his hand, and his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. The two boys grew, and as they grew, their differences deepened. Esau became a skilled hunter, a man of the field, strong and impulsive, while Jacob was quiet, dwelling among the tents, thoughtful and patient. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob, for she sensed the promise of God resting upon him. One day, when the twins were young men, Esau came in from the field faint with hunger. Jacob was cooking a stew of lentils, and Esau said, "Feed me, I pray you, for I am weary." Jacob looked at him calmly and said, "Sell me your birthright this day." Esau scoffed. "Behold, I am dying of hunger, what good is a birthright to me?" So he swore an oath and sold his birthright to Jacob for bread and lentil stew. When he had eaten and drunk, he rose and went his way, caring little for what he had lost. But heaven remembered, for the covenant was not to the strongest, but to the one who valued the promise. Years passed, and famine came upon the land. Isaac journeyed to Gerar, the land of the Philistines, and the Lord appeared to him, saying, "Do not go down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swore unto Abraham your father." Isaac built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord, and the land prospered under his care. Yet as his flocks increased, envy grew among the Philistines. They stopped up his wells, and Abimelech the king said, "Go from us, for you are mightier than we." Isaac departed and dug new wells in the valley, naming each for the struggles that followed: Ezek for contention, Sitnah for opposition, and finally Rehoboth for peace, saying, "Now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." That night the Lord appeared to him again, saying, "Fear not, for I am with you, and will bless you for my servant Abraham's sake." Isaac built yet another altar, his father's legacy alive in his heart. Soon Abimelech came to him seeking peace, and they made a covenant of friendship. The next day, Isaac's servants came rejoicing, "We have found water." They called the well Sheba, the well of the oath. As the years rolled on, Esau took wives from among the Canaanites, women of Hittite blood who brought sorrow to Isaac and Rebekah. They grieved that their son had joined himself to those who did not know the Lord. Meanwhile, Jacob dwelled near his parents, learning their ways, helping tend the herds and wells. Isaac's sight grew dim, and one day he called Esau and said, "My son, I am old and do not know the day of my death. Take your bow and hunt game for me, and prepare savory food such as I love, that my soul may bless you before I die." But Rebekah heard these words and remembered the prophecy given before the twins were born, that the elder would serve the younger. When Esau left to hunt, she called Jacob and said, "Your father will bless Esau. Now obey my voice and bring 2 young goats from the flock, that I may prepare the food your father loves. You shall bring it to him, and he will bless you before he dies." Jacob hesitated. "My brother is hairy, and I am smooth. If my father feels me, he will curse me." But Rebekah answered, "Let the curse be upon me, my son, only obey." She covered his hands and neck with goat skins, clothed him in Esau's garments, and sent him in. Jacob entered his father's tent. "My father," he said softly. Isaac answered, "Who are you, my son?" Jacob said, "I am Esau, your firstborn. Arise, eat of my game, that your soul may bless me." Isaac hesitated. The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Yet when he touched the skins and smelled the garments, he was deceived. He ate and blessed him, saying, "May God give you the dew of heaven, the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow to you. Be lord over your brothers." As soon as Jacob left, Esau returned from the hunt. He prepared food and brought it in, saying, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game." Isaac trembled greatly and said, "Who are you?" Esau cried, "I am your firstborn, Esau." The old man shook, realizing what had happened. "Your brother came deceitfully and has taken away your blessing." Esau wept aloud, crying, "Bless me also, my father." Isaac answered, "Behold, I have made him lord over you. What then can I do for you, my son?" Esau's sorrow turned to fury. "When my father dies," he said in his heart, "I will kill my brother Jacob." Rebekah learned of Esau's intent and sent Jacob away to her brother Laban in Haran. "Stay with him," she said, "until your brother's anger turns away. May the Lord keep you and bring you back in peace." Before Jacob departed, Isaac called him and blessed him again, this time knowingly, saying, "May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful, and give you the blessing of Abraham, to you and your descendants." And so Jacob set forth into the wilderness alone, the weight of both blessing and guilt upon his shoulders. Yet as he slept that night upon a stone, he dreamed of a ladder reaching from earth to heaven, and angels ascending and descending upon it. Above stood the Lord, saying, "I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants. I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land." When Jacob awoke, he said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not." He set up the stone as a pillar and poured oil upon it, calling the place Bethel, the house of God. Thus the promise passed on, from Abraham to Isaac, and now to Jacob. The covenant lived, unbroken, moving through generations like a river of faith. And though men faltered, God's word stood firm. For he who had sworn by himself never failed, and the line of promise continued, carrying within it the seed of salvation that would one day bless every nation under heaven.